Thursday night edition of the Anaheim Calling podcast. We are back to discuss a pair of games this week. First off, Jake, Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
This is our first podcast
Yes.
in the Roaring 20s.
You're gonna love that, aren't you?
I mean, I'm pushing it.
This is now officially the second decade of the AC Pod.
Yeah, we're multi-generational.
Yeah,
I don't think that's how that works.
We've made it to the second decade.
Yeah, we're on decade 2. Hopefully, it will be just as great, right, as decade 1.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's just move on from that. We've got 2 games to discuss. The Ducks had a New Year's Eve affair against the Vegas Golden Knights in Las Vegas on Tuesday. And boy, did it look like the Ducks, went to bed early, stayed in the night before in Vegas. It didn't look like they just absolutely showed up and just didn't play at all. That's not what it looked like.
Yeah, it didn't look like a case of the Vegas flu, right?
It did not at all look like a case of the Vegas flu. No, this was a terrible game.
It was bad. It was real bad.
This was Carlisle-esque. This was peak Carlisle bad performance. You had a goal from Corbinian Holzer to start things off from the Ducks, giving just a flicker of hope before it was promptly dashed by the Vegas Golden Knights. The shots on goal ended up being 43-28. The Golden Knights would score 4 unanswered goals, with notably a Jonathan Marchessault penalty shot that would basically just put things away. And then you had Jakob Silfverberg, who tried to make it respectable at the very end. By the way, all-star Jakob Silfverberg,
yes.
I should mention. And Jonathan Marchessault would salt it away. And then tonight, another game that you could argue was even worse somehow than the game against Vegas, where the Ducks seemed to be in it, seemed to want to at least try to win a game. They even had a 2-1 lead at one point, and it felt like things were maybe somewhat headed in the right direction. You had Isaac Lindstrom connecting with Jakob Silfverberg on a nice 2-on-1, and it just felt like, okay, maybe there's something here. Max Jones getting on the board, his 6th goal in his 60th NHL game. So it felt like things were moving forward. And then the Ducks did what they did against Vegas. They completely no-showed in the third period, did not register a single high-danger scoring chance at 5-on-5 in the third, and just completely handed it to the Coyotes on a silver platter. Numerous turnovers in the defensive zone. There was, I think, one shift in the third period where the trio of youngsters, Steele was out there with Jones, Kasha was out there, Jacob Lars was out there. They were basically stuck out there for about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
A couple icings mixed in there. So this has been a brutal stretch for the Ducks this week. And Jake, what I'm struggling to understand is why. I understand that this team is injured. I understand that Rickard Rakell is out. I understand that Nick Ritchie is hurt. But why must this team seemingly keel over when there's even the slightest disturbance to this roster? Explain it to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's a bit of a cop-out to say the injuries because every team deals with injuries. I mean,
and by the way, their blue line is fully healthy.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, you look at a team like Pittsburgh, look at all the injuries they've dealt with, and their underlying numbers are still insanely good. And now, granted, they have Malkin, and he's a generational type talent. But you plug guys in and the system works out well. And so I'm really kind of puzzled and struggling to find answers to why this is happening. Is it a situation where the team is just simply not good enough? The defense is nowhere near kind of where it's been. The fact that, I mean, we saw it when Josh Manson was out, how poor the blue line was. And he's come back and
he's been terrible.
Yeah. And so it's not as if he's kind of brought back what he had, and maybe he came back too early. Who knows? But outside of that, it really just feels like nothing's clicking. It's really kind of on the surface without really diving into the numbers, just kind of going off my eye test. It really seems like the only thing that's worked is Fowler and Goodbranson. Maybe that's really it. Outside of that, nothing's really been clicking. It feels like kind of losing Ritchie has kind of really thrown everything in flux. Not having Rakell also does that. It really just kind of seems like everything's off.
Yeah, I mean, and never more so did things seem off than the first goal of the game for the Vegas Golden Knights on Tuesday, where kind of a weird play, right? Because Gibson goes down and tries to cover the puck, and then from there, for whatever reason, the referee just doesn't blow the whistle. I should correct that. I don't believe it was actually the first goal, but regardless, the puck's just kind of loose, and there's been no whistle, and Josh Manson just pokes it into the net for whatever reason. I mean, I don't understand. So, by the way, the first goal of the game was a brutal turnover to Mark Stone, who would bury it. I'm getting all these goals confused.
There were a lot of them.
There's a lot of them, and they all have their special qualities in terms of how poor they were. But yeah, so Josh Manson had I thought one of his worst games as a Duck against Vegas, and to be quite frank, he wasn't much better against Arizona tonight. So I'm just going to cut right to the chase because I don't think our listeners really want to hear a whole lot about these games. The Ducks are dead last in the Western Conference right now. Let me ask you this. Let's just kind of walk this through step by step. Does this team have a run in it that will see it not make the playoffs, because I think that's out of the picture, but let's say, just at least make it interesting? Do they is it possible for you to see a run like that?
I could see a run, not of the caliber that would get them into the mix of the playoffs.
Do they have a 5-game, 6-game winning streak in them right now? It feels so difficult to imagine.
I could see them having a 5 of 8, something along those lines, because we've seen that. We saw it early on in the season. It's not as if it's something out of the ordinary, but I think I know this is going to be hard for people to hear because as you're kind of going on right now, you kind of want to figure out what's happening. You want to figure out the answers. And I think it really is just a situation. And I don't know. Let me know if this is too simplistic. But with the youth on the roster, with the kids that are coming up, these are growing pains. These are what I, in some ways, expected. Now, granted, I think this is maybe a little bit worse than just simply growing pains, but I think that that's a big part of it, where you have a guy like an Isaac Lundestrom on this roster in a pretty high-profile role, a guy like Sam Steele.
He's been actually good. I actually don't think Lundestrom is part of what's wrong right now.
I think
he's actually been one of the few forwards that looks just even remotely noticeable from an offensive perspective.
Is it? Well, let me ask you that. Is that your eye test kind of telling you that, and you kind of being blinded by that? Because against the Coyotes tonight, they were on the ice for 1.02 expected goals against. That line.
Well, I mean, you got to understand, no one is good right now.
But
no one is good. But I do think he's been better than the rest.
My point in saying that is that his line as a whole was the worst line on the night tonight. And
but they also scored.
And same thing against Vegas. They 1.39 expected goals against. That's 0.1 expected goals for, 1.39 against. I don't care if you're saying that eye test your eye test telling you that Lundestrom is playing well. That's great, and I think that that's good moving forward.
But how much do we attribute the lines totals to just him?
No, I fair, but I think
also the defensemen that are on the ice, the context.
But 6% expected goals for percentage against Vegas. And
I mean, look, again, I think we're getting kind of into the weeds here. I don't think he's been great, but I think he's just done stuff that, I mean, quite frankly, that's been a high bar for other guys to meet.
My point in bringing him up, though, in the first place was the fact that these are guys being thrust into roles that they're not necessarily ready to deal with. And I think that that's a fairly big part of this equation. And this is, honestly, when I thought about the season, I thought the Ducks would start out decent, kind of end up hitting a bit of a skid midway through the season, and maybe eventually finding their way back into into a playoff hunt. I don't know about that last part right now. But this is kind of how I expected the season to go, to be honest, because it's not as if they have high-end talent ready to come in to score goals. There's not someone ready right now that can come into this lineup and do that for them.
Well, you're right. They don't have any high-end talent, but at what point is it just getting bizarre that Sam Carrick is on this team's first line and first power play unit, while Daniel Sprong, who's just called up to, I guess, sit in the press box?
Yeah, that's just dumb. That's just absolutely dumb. I mean, there are certain things that you can talk about in the way of youth, different things like that. There are also other decisions that are just poor decisions.
Yeah, that's not this team's youth movement, having its ebbs and flows. That's just poor decision making.
And I would also say that you could make the argument that this is the time you put Sprong in the lineup. They're struggling to score goals.
Because nothing Yeah, exactly. Like right now, they have nothing to lose. They're already last. There's nowhere further to go down. So you might as well take some home run swings
Yeah.
and see where it gets you.
Well, and take your home run swing, see what happens. And if it doesn't work, well, you're back at square one right where you're at right now.
Yeah.
If it works, then you know moving forward that you have someone. It is odd to me that Sprong has only gotten in one game this year, yet he's been on the roster for 3 different games. You know what I just had a weird kind of thought about?
Mm-hmm.
Do they want to expose him to waivers?
Well, he's cleared waivers already once this season.
No, but so in order to go on waivers a second time, he would have to either play in 10 games or be on the roster for 30 days. Once one of those two things hit, whichever comes first, you then have to clear waivers again. And Sprong, even in his quotes to Eric Stevenson, mentioned that early on in the season, it's very rare for guys to be picked up, whereas you kind of see later on in the year, guys get picked up on waivers all the time.
Yeah, but he's already cleared waivers once, though. They've sent him back down.
Yeah, I know.
And he's come back up.
My point is that the 30 days on the NHL roster have not passed.
Yeah.
My point in all this is that they are putting him on the roster because they want to put him on waivers again for someone to take him.
But isn't that just terrible asset management?
Yeah, 100%.
That's beyond terrible. You might as well trade him for a 7th round pick. You might as well trade him for a bag of pucks.
How do you know they haven't tried?
That's a great question, but I don't know. I guess the appeal to the unknown there will win the day. I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of puzzling.
It is.
Everything is puzzling right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just kind of zooming back in though to this current roster, if you look at their rolling expected goals differential, right? The Ducks were actually getting to a point of respectability in about mid-December, and since that time, it's gone just totally crumbling down, right? They were actually above break even in terms of expected goals differential, right? So basically parsing out what they're generating versus what they're giving up. They were finally in that positive region, and now they've just totally crashed down. And again, it's hard to understand because losing Raquel really hurts.
Losing Richie really hurts.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really puzzling to me how it seems like any injury to this team sends it reeling.
What was the date? December? I have a sneaking suspicion as to what's happened, but I'm curious. December 17th?
Yes.
So, as of December... Okay, now this kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Because I was going to say, I think that it might just be the teams that they're playing are better, which affects that rolling 5 games. Starting on...
Yeah.
The only thing that kind of is an outlier here, so starting on December 22nd, they played the Rangers, which they got completely outplayed by the Islanders similarly.
And the Rangers aren't good.
No. Since then, though, they've played Vegas, they've played the Flyers, they've played Vegas, they've played Arizona. So,
yeah, I mean,
playing Vegas twice doesn't help with that.
It doesn't. They actually won one game against Vegas, but
true.
Yeah, I mean, and the Coyotes have gotten insanely better. I mean, this is not at all the same Coyotes team, and it's crazy how just adding one guy in Taylor Hall will do that.
Yeah.
So we'll get more into it here. We're kind of coming close to our second break, but go ahead.
I do want to show people that rolling expected goal total on the screen. So if you're watching the stream right now, you'll now be able to see on your screen what we're talking about and kind of where that bump comes in right around the December 17th mark, which should be showing on the screen right now. So this essentially what this is for those of you that don't fully know, the rolling expected goal total, I believe it's 5 games is what they utilize. And essentially it is the expected goal difference over that 5-game stretch. And so it adds in those 5 games what your plus minus is for expected goals. If you're above the line, that's good. If you're below the line, that's bad, basically is how to read this. So you can see early on in the season, the Ducks were, as we can all remember, they were playing well, staying above the line. Then the Manson injury hit, and it really kind of coincided with that dip down. Once Manson came back, you saw the slow trend up, and then there's just kind of been falling off a cliff of late.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that, when they were doing better, if memory serves, they also had, I think, a homestand in there.
The very beginning of the season, they had a homestand.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know. Chris Weidman called up, if we want to kind of shift this over a little bit. Someone that did not play, and someone that we've been talking about, potentially giving this team a different look, especially on that third pairing tonight, where I don't think Michael Del Zotto was bad by any means. I mean, he had a nice assist on the Max Jones goal. Maybe Chris Weidman gets a shot. I think what we're really looking for at this point, if we're kind of just keeping it to a granular level before we get into more of the bigger picture, it's just for Dallas Eakins to start trying stuff that's a little less risk averse. Because Sam Carrick just isn't giving them anything on the first line. And I don't want to, like you were talking about earlier, that's not his role. That's not his role in the NHL. That's what he is in the AHL, but that's not what this is.
He shouldn't be on an NHL power play.
And that's the other thing. He's on the first wave. And if you watch their power play with him out there, he's like a dead zone where the puck goes to him and nothing happens, right? He just gets it back and then he goes and stands in front of the net. So I'm just not totally sure what the thinking is there. Again, I really think that a lot of this comes down to just, hey, this is a guy that Dallas Eakins knows, that he can trust, but that's just not getting them anywhere. And that's not really, again, through any fault of Sam Carrick. This is not a referendum on Sam Carrick. It's just to say that he's a player with limitations like any other player.
Yeah.
And right now he's just way above his head, just like you were talking about with Lundestrom, just like I think we're seeing with Sam Steele, at times Max Comtois, although I think Comtois has been okay lately.
I think he's looked good.
I think he's been fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm overlooking different stats, but I think in general, though, what's really hurting them, and I think that you touched on this really, it's the center line. I think that that's what's really killing them because you have Lundestrom, who is as green as they get, right? Only 20 years of age. You have Sam Steele, who is just not good defensively right now. I don't think there's any way around that.
Which is not, and I do want to kind of point this out, that's not kind of that's not out of the ordinary, basically, for a 21-year-old.
Exactly. That's not the end of the world. And then, I mean, right now, your fourth line center is kind of this rotating cast with Derek Grant out. And so it's hard to defend in the NHL. It's hard to really kind of play that up-tempo game when you don't really have centers that can both funnel the offense and support the defense. And Ryan Getzlaf's really the only guy who can do that right now, and Ryan Getzlaf's 34.
Well, and I think that you've kind of seen in these last couple games some meltdowns from Getzlaf in his own zone, and I think that's led to goals against. And granted, that's going to happen. He's getting up there in age. When your body doesn't react the way that it used to, you're not going to be in the right position. It's not going to allow you to react in the right way. That's just what's going to happen. And in the situations he's being relied upon to be in, he's just not able to kind of react as he would. So if he's the only one doing that and being able to kind of be in that role, that's not exactly great, which kind of makes it curious. And now, granted, we've talked about, I don't think he's the best defensive center, but it makes it kind of curious that Adam Henrique has been pushed into this role in the wing that, granted, has allowed him to thrive, I think, offensively.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. That's what I was going to get to, is that I am really wondering right now what the upside is of Adam Henrique playing at the wing, because where they're really suffering is in their own zone. And it's clear that Lundestrom is, like you said, over his head, and that Sam Steele is, he's being dragged into all this. And so Adam Henrique is this supposed, veteran center with all this experience, and he would seem like the guy you would want right now for that exact situation. And yet, for whatever reason, that's just not happening. So that's a little curious. Hey, here's a little conspiracy theory before we go into our first break. Pumping trade value
of Henrique,
getting him on the first line next to Getzlaf.
Trying to build it up. I'm really, really curious how this deadline's going to go.
Well, don't hold your breath, but we're going to go into our first break here. And on the other side, we might just have to go into that right away. So we'll be right back. Okay, back from the first break. So I think we touched. Go ahead.
Real quick, I want to make mention. I'm throwing it back to that rolling expected goal total because I realized it after I switched away.
Jake loves charts.
I love charts. It wasn't a 5-game moving average. The first one, it was a season total. This is the 5-game moving average. So the total was not great. The 5-game moving average, also not great of late. So there you go.
Okay. The chart gate has been resolved.
I felt the need to correct myself.
No,
Sorry.
that's good. That's good. I appreciate, your thoroughness, your conscientiousness. It's important. It's a good quality.
You also hate it.
No, I don't. Wait, what? Whoa, God. Okay. Anyway, let's pivot over here. Let's do the old pivot. We've talked a bit about the roster, the current machinations of this lineup. I think it's time to start asking bigger questions, though, with this team. I feel like I don't want to say we've seen enough of this roster, but the Ducks have been at it with this mix now for the better part of, 3-4 years, right? The same kind of key figures. They're trying to turn the leaf over to these younger kids. It's been a similar cast, and I think that to really embrace this rebuild and to really supply it with picks and prospects, I think the Ducks are just going to have to be sellers at the trade deadline.
So one thing I want to bring up into this equation, because I think it's important, and it's something I realized over the last couple of days, but specifically today when I was thinking about it, the expansion draft is looming, and it is a big deal, because let me at least kind of point this out for the expansion draft purposes, is that I think you can lose someone good from your roster for the expansion draft and kind of go into the expansion draft expecting that if you are contending next year. So let's just say, for instance, the Ducks and Josh Manson. You can stomach losing Manson to Seattle if he helps you contend next year. If you're in a spot where he helps you win a cup next year and then you lose him for nothing, and you can kind of almost stomach that because, you got value out of him during that season. The issue is what value, and this is something you've brought up, and I think that as I've thought about it more, it's a valid point. What value does Manson bring to the Ducks next season? Not a whole lot, because the Ducks aren't going to be necessarily contending next year. He gives them on-ice value, but that's not as much value as something can bring them in the future. And so when talking about the expansion draft, remember that you can either protect 8 skaters or 7 forwards in 3D. So let's just assume that they go 7 forwards 3D because you get more players out of that. You get more bang for your buck. The Ducks have 4 defensemen they most likely will want to protect in Mahura, Manson, Lindholm, Fowler. So you either are going to lose one of those 3 or you need to trade one. So that's where I think trading the Josh Manson thought comes in and becomes even more valid this year. And then from a forward perspective, you have about 9 or 10 forwards for those 7 spots, because you've got Getzlaf, you've got Henrique, you've got Silfverberg, you've got Raquel, you've got Jones, you've got Terry, you've got Steele, you've got Lundestrom, you've got Richie, you've got Kasha. And there's probably 1 or 2 guys I've missed in there. So, now granted, you're probably just going to lose one of the forwards, and that's going to be it.
Right.
But if you can somehow start moving guys out and getting things back, you may be in a situation where you may not lose anything great, which, honestly, I feel like the expansion draft hurts rebuilding teams more than it hurts teams that are contending.
Because the lack of veterans makes it so you have to expose like a younger player?
Yeah.
Is that what we're thinking?
Essentially, yeah. Essentially along those lines is that you may have more guys. If you're a rebuilding team that doesn't have guys that are in that first year or two, which the Ducks are in that situation, that you're going to have to expose a lot of what could be your next wave of core, your core. And,
I mean, you could argue, this is kind of a bad example, but the Ducks losing Shea Theodore, they didn't really feel that right away because they made it to the conference final that season. But right now, I think they feel it quite a bit. And even like with the Capitals with Nate Schmidt, they won the cup because they're so good. But hey, that blue line is going to come due at some point, and they've had to shoehorn different veterans into it.
But my point with that is that they were a contending team, so they were able to kind of deal with that because they had the depth there.
That's true. Yeah.
As a rebuilding,
I get your point.
As a rebuilding team, you don't necessarily have the depth to recuperate that. If the Ducks lost, let's just say Steele or Kasha or Terry or Jones, one of those guys for absolutely nothing, that could potentially be devastating for this franchise moving forward.
Well, it depends. It depends if you're gaining something out of that by protecting someone else, right? There's this whole.
But you're still potentially going to lose them for nothing.
Yeah, no, and I don't foresee that happening. I think the Ducks are going to do whatever they have to do,
probably
maneuvering wise to prevent a Seattle.
But that's my point, is that this is the start of that maneuvering. I think you need to have the foresight where you're not going into next year not knowing and putting yourself in a bad situation. This is when the Ducks need to start addressing it.
So what is your kind of then next step to this quandary?
Well, I think Manson needs to get moved. I think that's almost inevitable at this point with the value that he probably has, with the way his game's been trending.
And his contract is just so movable. That's the thing I keep coming back to, is he's got 2 years left after this at a very palatable cap hit where we assume that the cap is going to go up. As for
the forwards, maybe you're fine with leaving Richie exposed and then he's the guy that they take.
I think that wouldn't kill them.
No, that wouldn't. But I think that maybe you got to look at moving a Henrique and one of Raquel or Silfverberg. And it's funny on the Silfverberg note, I don't foresee that happening, but Josh Cooper in the Athletic, was it today or recently, it speculated the Ducks should potentially try to move him. And
his contract is, again, fairly movable.
His contract's movable
even with the term.
His contract's movable, and I would almost argue that term gives him more value because the team knows and has cost certainty with that, as compared to them not knowing if that guy's going to be there past this run. And so let's say a team like Boston was looking to get him. Now, granted, I don't know what their cap situation's like off the top of my head, but
sure. But Boston's always aggressive and will find ways to make deals.
Yes, exactly. So. And so that gives them this guy for the next couple of years in their contending window.
Yeah. And so just because I was curious, Boston has 1.7 in cap space, 1.7 million.
So they need to move money out.
Maybe the Ducks take on bad money. I don't know. But the point is, I think that with Silfverberg, what's interesting there is that would this not be the best possible time to trade him? He scored his 15th goal of the season tonight.
Yeah.
He's exactly on pace for 30 goals this season. This, as much as I enjoy watching Jakob Silfverberg play, this is not who he is, right? He's never been a 30-goal scorer. No. He's been a perennial 20-goal guy, 15 to 20,
being playing in the 25 range.
Hockey, if
is valuable.
Exactly. And if you're a team targeting him, you probably assume you're going to have to pay a little bit of that tax for the season he's having. But he's still, I think, a good investment for the next couple of years because he can be a steady part of a contending roster.
And I think he would age well.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, seems like he doesn't take a lot of damage. I mean, he hasn't been hurt really, that much in his career.
Early on, a little bit when he first came to the Ducks, but outside of that, not really.
Yeah, no. And you don't really ever see him taking like nasty falls or hits. He's a pretty reliable guy. And so, yeah, the question would be, what do you think his value would be? What does he get you?
I think the only player on the Ducks that I think that has higher value than Silfverberg is Raquel.
Well, Raquel's a different story. Let's stick on Silfverberg.
I think Lindholm also. Sorry.
Yeah, but Lindholm is probably in my untouchables list.
Oh, completely.
He's 25. He's got 2 years left in a team-friendly deal. Yeah, I just think he's part of that.
I want to make this clear because the Marty Griffin chimes in, came here for the Silfverberg hate. There's no hate here. It's all love.
This conversation, in a way, is a testament to how good Silfverberg's been this season, because as much as I think the Ducks, when they re-signed him last season, I should say, were thinking, hey, this guy's going to be part of our team long term, I just wonder how much this season has changed that calculus a little bit.
Yeah, if the Ducks saw this as a quick turnaround, maybe it's a different conversation.
Because the quick turnaround just doesn't seem to be there anymore.
No, it doesn't.
For whatever reason, whether it's the mix, right, just this mix of players, whatever it is, it just seems like this is going to be more of like a 2 to 3 year turnaround, which is actually pretty standard, right, for teams that are looking to turn a leaf over. And I think, what you can do to make sure it's not too long is you just commit to it. You get into it as soon as you can. You take a little pain up front, but I think it's going to pay dividends on the other side.
This is going to be telling this trade deadline and the the trade deadline's end of February, so the next 2 months basically. Yeah. It's going to be telling over how Bob Murray views this team, where he views it at, because if he just stays status quo and no one gets moved, everything's the same.
That just doesn't feel logical.
Exactly. And so that almost seems like he may not be the right. And now, granted, think last podcast you would ask me if Bob Murray was the right man to lead this ship, or maybe
that was the bonus pod.
That was the bonus episode.
We for those who don't know, on our Patreon,
it was a good one.
An insane 2-hour podcast with an hour solely on the Ducks. It's season by we basically, you know how we do game recaps? We did a decade recap.
Yeah, it was a good one. And then an hour of Star Wars.
Yeah, that kind of made up for it.
Yeah. But whether or not Murray, this is going to be telling whether he can be a guy that can lead them in this rebuild, because I don't think he's dealt with a team in this situation. Now, people will bring up the fact of, yes, 2011, 2012, they were pretty bad, and they turned it around real quick. But the difference between now and then is then they had Getzlaf and Perry entering their primes. They had elite goal scorers, elite playmakers, elite talent, Hall of Famers on the forefront.
Getzlaf and Perry were 25.
Yes, in their prime.
26.
And for however you view Lindholm and Fowler, they're not as good as Getzlaf and Perry were for this team.
Well, I feel like that's kind of what this has come down to, and it's funny because we still haven't talked about what Silfverberg could get, but
sure, we'll get to it.
I feel like that's what this has kind of come down to, is that this idea that this team could just turn it around. I feel it was a bit of an overestimation of this roster, that you're asking a lot of 34-year-old Ryan Getzlaf. You're hoping that Adam Henrique at age 29, I mean, not that that's declining by any means, but you're going to get a little more variance when you enter that age range. And Andre Kasha hasn't really found that scoring touch this year. It almost solely depended on how good the kids were going to be, and the kids have been, well, kids. So
they've had some good games. They've had some bad games.
This is where you end up. And so back to Silfverberg, though. I mean,
what do you think he would get?
Well, it just depends who you're dealing with. I mean, it's really hard to estimate trade value in the NHL, because you see Taylor Hall going for a first rounder, a bunch of kind of blah prospects.
But then again, term.
I do think Silfverberg could get a second rounder at least, maybe a first from a contender.
I think he gets a first and a prospect.
Yeah, I mean, that feels reasonable to me, because it's not going to be a great first, right? It's going to be in the 20s, but we see the value in doing that with what the Ducks did last year, where they're able to take a bit more of a riskier pick with Braden Tracy late in the first round.
Well, I think look at what Montour got. Now, granted, different positions, different things like that, but Brandon Montour is under club control for essentially 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And he got what? It was a first round pick. And
Brandon Pooley, who's now completely irrelevant. But
true.
Yeah.
but still, so I think Silfverberg easily has more trade value than Brandon Montour.
Yeah, I mean, he has to get a first rounder.
I think a first rounder and A/B prospect, honestly.
I would say B prospect. Because I just, maybe your argument gets more credible with the idea that the term makes it easier for a team to stomach giving up a prospect.
Yeah.
But teams are just so loath to giving up prospects, it seems.
I think it's the term, and I think it's the fact of you're getting him, you have the cost certainty of it, you know what you're getting. It's funny, the conversation has kind of turned where I feel like a couple years back, no one wanted guys with term, and it almost seems like it's the opposite now. People want the term because they know what they're going to have, and they can basically prepare for that. Hockey Boys has an interesting comment in our Twitch chat that says, I think we should consider trading Raquel over Silfverberg.
Oh, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's an either or, but I mean, I understand the argument, because he's got a lower cap hit. He does have 2 years left on his deal after this season.
I think he gets more for you. I think
he definitely gets you more. I mean, he is a bona fide goal scorer.
Yes, but I think the issue is he is more likely to help you once the team has turned the corner.
Here's kind of the dark reality that we're entering, is that by the time the Ducks are going to be good again, Raquel's going to be 28, 29.
Yeah, and I think
so.
You need some guys like that, though.
You do, and I think he will age decently. Well, I don't know.
And I think that's the argument for why you move Silfverberg over him, is because if Raquel is 28 or 29, Silfverberg's 32-ish. Right?
Yeah, and also the thing with Raquel is that let's say this team can turn it around by the end of his contract. Well, if the Ducks are somewhat relevant again in 2 years, then then all of a sudden that bargain deal that he's on is still an asset for your team.
Yeah.
You can still take advantage of that
Mm-hmm.
because you're losing. I think trading that contract, even though it doesn't make a ton of sense to have him on the team right now, I think you're kind of banking that later on that value is going to be restored.
The only way I would move him is if it was for a really high level guy that's a couple years younger than him.
It would have to be, yeah, exactly. Someone somewhat established, and a first round pick. I think that's kind of where it starts.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, again, these things are so hard to estimate because look at what Taylor Hall got. I mean, I hate to go back to that.
I think it's a different conversation, though.
It is. And also, Raquel's contract is easier to move. There's the certainty.
It's the fact that the reason why Taylor Hall got what he got was partially...
he's a rental.
Yeah, and partially also kind of a weird move by New Jersey with the other deals that were reported. But yeah, it's because he's a rental. He's not necessarily going to sign in Arizona, so you can't really ask as much.
Well, and that's why, as we approach our second break here, that's why I think the Ducks should pounce on being sellers, because they actually have guys who I think could fetch you a decent return and could help you really embark into this rebuild. Because look, I mean, as good as Silfverberg and Raquel are, I don't think that, okay, the Ducks go into another year of the lottery. They're not guys who you can't necessarily go out and get in free agency, right? They're not irreplaceable in the long term. Like let's say a Hampus Lindholm is, who I just don't think you can't pluck a Hampus Lindholm out of thin air or out of free agency or something like that. So
yeah, and also I think the other thing is it seems like it's gonna be a buyer's market where there's gonna be a lot of buyers and not a whole lot of sellers, because it seems like there's a lot of teams in the mix, at least in the West. You essentially only have 3 teams maybe that are necessarily out of it. And in the East, you have a fair amount more, but still, there's not going to be a whole lot of sellers, I think. And so that kind of allows you to almost get a little bit more because there's not as many guys being sold.
Well, so realistically, though, I mean, they're not going to trade all these guys.
No.
At least not at this deadline. If anyone that's noteworthy gets traded at this deadline, who do you think it is?
I think Adam Henrique is the most likely. We haven't talked about him that much.
I know. I was going to say we haven't even talked about him at all, but yeah.
But I think Adam Henrique or Josh Manson. I think the writing's on the wall with Manson, with the fact of if Bob Murray's doing his job and looking at the expansion draft and making that a priority moving forward because of what happened in the past, I think he looks to move, and I think you can get a pretty decent amount for him. I think Adam Henrique, his contract's not that bad. It's not great. But I think that there may be teams in need looking for exactly what Henrique can bring to the table and can really help. I mean, I've long said, Winnipeg is the perfect location for him. They need a second-line center.
I would be impressed if Bob Murray pulled off a Henrique trade just because of his contract.
Yeah, but I could see here's the thing, I would be, but I also, he seems like a guy that
has value.
Yes, that no matter what we say about him, there's always going to be GMs out there that want that type of guy on their team.
What's funny to me is that, and apparently he's a great locker room guy too. Not sure how much we're factoring that in here, but what's funny is that all these guys we're talking about have no trade clauses or modified no trade clauses.
True.
So Silfverberg has a 12-team no trade list. Henrique has a 10-team no trade list. Manson has a 12-team no trade list. Everyone has a modified no trade clause. But yeah, if I were to guess, I would say Manson, just to what you've talked about. And also, I think, again, going back to the contract, I think it's the most tradable. And I think when you're looking at the trade market, everyone wants a right shot D going into the playoffs who plays his style of game. I just think he's a kind of a textbook. He's really like a deluxe trade deadline acquisition if you're a team, because not only are you getting him for the run that you're going into, but also you're getting him for 2 more years. Like that's why I think the Ducks should really commit to selling, because their guys actually have value. So, all right.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Do you want to touch a little bit more on these games? Because we've done a whole lot of trade talk. I mean,
yeah. Well, we're going to go into our second break here, and then we'll talk about the games a little bit. Okay, back from the second break. So, after a 20-minute trade deadline special,
Ah,
way too early trade deadline
eh,
special, you wanted to do some more
hey,
game talk.
it's not that early. 2 months.
Yeah, it's coming up. It's
Yeah,
fast approaching. I
yeah,
mean, and now is the time to start thinking about it because this is when, prices get set, you identify buyers and sellers, and eventually, hopefully, it crystallizes at the trade deadline. Although supposedly this is going to be a quiet year overall. So we'll just have to see.
yeah. I think just a little bit on the games that I think that John Gibson was insanely good in both of these games. It really kind of is sad that they lost both of these games at this amount. John Gibson was just so good.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's unfortunate is that John Gibson has really struggled for large parts of the season, but these two games I think were in some ways one of some of his better performances. It's just the team around him was so bad. And actually, I'm glad that you brought up John Gibson because he had a pretty scathing quote after the Vegas game. And I found this very interesting because John Gibson, he's a guy who speaks his mind, but he's not necessarily a guy who you're going to hear, say something super noteworthy or, calling teammates out or, whatever the case may be. And so after the game, he responded to a question. It's frustrating when we go out and we're not ready to play. It's a privilege to play in the National Hockey League, and it feels like some guys are taking it for granted after that loss to Vegas. That was, I mean, look, we don't want to read too much into quotes, but that kind of says it all to me.
Yeah, I mean,
because that's what that game was. They were not ready to play.
It really is, and I think that
it's an accurate assessment of what happened. No,
it is, and I think that this is partially John Gibson stepping up to the plate and trying to answer the questions because I think it's not even a question at this point that this is John Gibson's team. I think Ryan Getzlaf is still the captain, but I think the transition has been made that this is John.
You think that, huh?
Do you disagree?
No, I haven't really given that a whole lot of thought.
It kind of hit me early on this season that I was like, Getzlaf is the captain, but this is John Gibson's team.
Well, I mean, John Gibson is now 26.
Yeah.
He's been in the NHL for much longer than we realized. We were in our decade recap, we were realizing, oh, wow, 13, 14, he's in the playoffs. So at age 20, talk about that. And so, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And he's been, I think one thing that kind of gives him credibility as a leader is that he's been in the absolute worst situations. And he's also been there for some good times as well, right, with the playoff runs. And so he has a lot of experience, and he does seem like a guy who would have a pretty strong voice in that locker room.
Yeah, and so I think that this is him probably stepping up to the plate and in some ways trying to call out his teammates.
By the way, total tangent.
Yeah.
Goalies should be able to wear the C.
I mean, they should. Although the issue with it is that you can't having a goalie come out and talk to the ref, but they should still be allowed to wear it, and you just have the guys with the A's do it.
Just have the A, yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, let them wear it.
Just do what Luongo did.
Wear the C on the helmet.
I think that almost looks better in a way.
It does.
Yeah. Anyway, but you were saying, sorry.
Yeah, I think that, well, so real quick, in the Vegas game, the Ducks had allowed, I believe it was 4.83 or 4.35 expected goals against. So
good.
The 5 goals against, not really on John Gibson. And then against Arizona tonight.
And one of them was a penalty shot, which questionably
also should not have counted.
Yeah, I mean, Marchessault goes for the fake. Gibson drops down, and then it looked like Marchessault's his move had the puck going backwards for a bit. So I don't think that should have counted.
Yeah,
people were upset by the penalty shot. I thought the penalty shot was
the penalty shot was fine.
Yeah, it was a slash. But then I don't think that should have counted.
Yeah, it definitely should not have. But tonight, 3.49 expected goals against, and he had some really great saves in the process. So overall, slightly lower than expected, but I think when you take in the context of everything, he was still outstanding. The 2-on-0 save tonight was just insanely good.
And also, what's impressive is, well, talking about the Vegas game, is that so many of the chances came from in tight. I mean, he was just getting besieged from the slot. And so, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because finally he has some great performances and the team kind of lets him down. So his frustration is certainly understandable in that quote.
Yeah. So question time.
Yes.
So for those of you watching the recorded version of this on YouTube, yes, we do post the stream on YouTube. You can find it by searching for the AC Pod there. If you want to like the channel, subscribe. It really helps out a lot. If you want to comment, we will read those comments. Also, if you're listening to the recorded version of this on your favorite podcast services, we do a stream of the show each and every time at twitch.tv/acpod, where you can tune in live, interact with us, put your questions in, talk with other people in the chat. And you can also help support the show. If you have Amazon Prime, you get Twitch Prime, and you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every 30 days. You do have to hit that subscribe button after 30 days. And with that subscribe, you help support the show more than you can imagine. And with that, you get special emotes in the chat and a special badge next to your name. So let's get into some questions. So Babyus of Yoda actually had asked us if we can talk about Gibson's comments about people not being ready to play. So we've already kind of answer that in the process.
Yeah.
The Marty Griffin asked, though, question, does Aiken survive the rebuild/retool?
Ooh, I mean, it's going to be tough because it seems like they're going to lose a lot more games.
Yeah,
so,
he's kind of gotten dealt a pretty bad card.
Yeah, I almost feel bad in a way because this is supposed to be like his big redemption tour. And so far, I mean, is his value higher now? You know, is the perception of Dallas Aikens now better than it was before he got this job? Has the estimation, because I don't know if he was necessarily at a damaged reputation, but it took a hit in Edmonton, and I don't know how many people are watching him in the AHL. So we'll see. I think it might be a little too early to say on that one.
Yeah.
He's also not doing himself any favors,
no.
I think.
I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, that there are some definite issues that he is making. So Dark Hero 87 asked us, question, is there a defensive lineup using the current talent that could quell the recent shots on goal bleed? It's a good question.
So we're talking about just the blue line?
Yes, just the blue line.
See, the funny thing is, again, I don't think the blue line is really the issue right now.
They're having some. I don't know if there's a way you can fix it necessarily outside of the guys just kind of, as dumb as it sounds, playing better. Because the Manson Lindholm pairing playing as poorly as they have, is rough.
They've been pathetically bad the last two games.
Yeah,
and that's a problem because that's the pairing you're looking to for that kind of steadiness and consistency. And so I think the one thing they could try to do there is try to go find someone to help that third pairing, whether it's via trade or just get Chris Weidman, just shake up that third pairing a little bit because they just haven't found a combination that works, whether it's been Del Zotto, whether it's been Holzer, Larson. It just really the only time that the third pairing has been good, you guessed what I'm about to say, is when Josh Maher has been out there. But I think they're preferring to have him down in the AHL.
Is it time to break up Manson Lindholm? Is it time to
the problem
potentially
is what
bring up?
The problem is, what do you do?
I mean, maybe you try Chris Weidman there.
I do think it's worth a look because, again, eye test, right? I think it's not Lindholm who's the weak link on that pairing right now. So, I mean, what would be interesting is if you put Manson in like a third pairing role.
Yeah.
And you found, because right now Fowler, Goodbranson, I mean, obviously they weren't great tonight, but I think they're the only pairing that's been consistently good all season.
And I think Fowler, honestly, over this last little bit, maybe not his own zone, but he's looked really good in the offensive zone with the small bit of extended stretches that the Ducks have been getting. I think Fowler's been noticeably good jumping up into the play and picking his spots. And I think that's...
Well, he had a nice scoring chance in the first period.
He did. He had a couple, actually, I think.
Well, so here's the thing, though, is that Lindholm Manson had really good numbers before this last little stretch. And so I'm kind of willing to give them a little more time. Yeah. A little more time.
Well, I'm just trying to kind of go to Dark Hero 87's question of, is there anything you can do to kind of stop this current bleed? And so...
Well, as we talked about earlier, I think the answer to that question is the centers. Because centers in the NHL are basically third D. And so... Well, not necessarily. It depends on the team and their defensive structure, and some teams have their wingers basically alternating as centers in the defensive zone, just depending on the personnel. But I think that for the Ducks, where they really need to kind of find stability isn't actually in the pairings, it's in the centers. And whether that means, for example, moving a Lundestrom to the wing, moving a Steele to the wing, I think they need to get Henrique back in the middle. And heck, even consider putting Sam Carrick as your third line center, because that is a spot I would be curious to see him in, because I think that's really what he's kind of built for. Yeah. So we'll just have to see.
Yep. All right. So let's go to this question from El Miko.
Hold on. Zen has 8 with a funny one. Is that Yanni Hakanpää's music? ?
Yeah, no.
Damn it.
No. Not if he plays in one game. Well, here's the real fun one. Do the Ducks, if for whatever reason Lucas Sabisa is put back on waivers?
Oh, yes.
Do they claim him back?
I mean, he's an NHL defenseman who can play on the third pairing. So
I mean, is he better than Holzer? He might actually be better than Holzer.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys who can clear that bar right now. So
all right. So El Miko asks, projected placement in the standings.
Oh, why are you asking me these questions?
Hey, it's not me.
I know. I'm directing this at El Miko. Why are you asking me these questions? Because I'm afraid of my answer. Are we talking about in the Western Conference? Are we limiting this to the Western Conference?
Sure.
I don't know how much further up they get than where they are now.
I say second to last.
Yeah. Let's just go with that, second to last.
Sorry if we're being buzzkills.
Well, no, but it's just the team that I could see maybe falling out and dropping below the Ducks would be like a Chicago. But because outside of that, if you look at the teams above them, I don't see Calgary, Vancouver, Minnesota, or Winnipeg just suddenly falling out of it, because those are all teams that are going to.
I could see Winnipeg falling out of it.
Yeah, maybe Winnipeg, but
I don't necessarily see Winnipeg falling that far though.
Well, that's the thing.
That's the key.
I mean, that would be there's a 10-point gap between those two teams right now.
I think right now, most likely they end up second or third to last.
Because if you look at, here's what I'll say: they'll finish second to last. The Sharks will finish last, and the Kings will finish ahead of the Kings.
Wow.
Or sorry, the Kings will finish ahead of the Ducks.
Wow.
Well, the Kings have good underlying numbers.
I know, but that's still just bold. The Kings don't have goaltending. There's a reason why even with those underlying numbers, they're at this situation.
It's not really that bold to say they're going to finish third to last.
I mean, it kind of is.
Well, look at the Ducks' numbers on the season, though. They haven't really ever been good to reliable. They've been close to okay for small stretches, and largely they've been bad. So you look at the Kings, and I just trust that a little bit more in a larger sample.
By the way, here's your Detroit Red Wings update. Seeing as I have the standings open, -68 in goal difference right now.
God, they have 10 wins.
Sorry, Justin.
They have 10 wins in 41 games. That's insane. Anyway,
watch, they're not going to get Lafreniere.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing with this tanking thing.
I know. There's still some good prospects no matter what for them, though. The thing is, they're guaranteeing themselves at least fourth.
It makes me depressed that the Canadians only have 8 more wins than the Red Wings. It really does.
All right, so let's get into this question. The Marty Griffin says, question, when will we get to see Ducks legend Chris Weidman? Do you think he plays in their next game? He was called up.
For those who can't see, I'm just throwing my hands up. I have no idea. Daniel Sprong should have played already. But he's a bit of a different case. Yeah, I'm going to go with yes. Why not?
Well, for anyone,
they have to try it.
Well, for anyone out there that doesn't know, and I'm double checking where this is at right now, but last time I had checked, Chris Weidman I think led the AHL in goals from a defenseman.
Yeah, well, he was up there in point scoring. Yeah, so he's had a legitimately good season in the AHL and deserves a shot.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look right now. So yeah, he is still first with 8 goals on the season in 26 games, 19 points in 26 games. 19 points puts him at 16th in the league in points. But yeah, first in the league from goals from a defenseman.
Yeah.
So, very good. Erica's XO said, question, any chance Larson gets picked up in the expansion draft? I'm going to say unlikely because the Ducks are probably going to have other people that most likely have to be exposed like we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know who would want him.
Well, Seattle. It would have to be Seattle.
Well, yeah. Okay. In this scenario, it would be Seattle that would be wanting him, but I can't imagine Seattle wanting him. I can't imagine anyone wanting him right now. So, yeah.
That hate's just.
Well, it's just reality. It's just reality.
I
He's playing off. He's had an awful season. So anyway, moving on.
Yep, I think that's gonna do it for the night, though.
Wow, this has just been a brutally just critical pod, but that's okay.
Hey, sometimes it's needed. They've had 2 of their worst games of the season in a row.
Yeah, like I don't think we're being unfair. I think if nothing else, we actually try to be as fair as possible. Like we hold back as much as we can to kind of let things play out, but it's not just those last 2 games. The Ducks, if you look at kind of the bigger picture here, going back to that road trip, they only won 1 out of the 4 on the Eastern road trip, where they played Flyers, Devils, Islanders, Rangers. They only won 1 game. After that, they beat Vegas going back home. Then they lost to the Flyers, lost to the Golden Knights, lost to the Golden Knights. So it's just like this. It's a trend, and now it's just bubbling up and it's overflowing. Anyway, we should wrap this thing up.
Yeah. So Babius of Yoda asked a good question. Has Felix watched the finale of The Mandalorian yet?
No time. No time.
Wow. Yeah, we didn't talk. We talked about The Mandalorian as a whole on the Patreon episode, but not the final episode because somebody hasn't watched it yet.
How long is it?
Like 40 minutes.
I might have to watch it.
Yeah, seriously, it's good.
I don't know. I've been so preoccupied by the Skywalker saga that it's taken my attention.
What have you been watching? How have you been so preoccupied?
I've just been watching Rise of Skywalker on repeat.
No, you have not. I know you've only seen it once.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let's move on from this topic.
Wow. Just moving on like that. All right. So
just doing it.
That's going to do it, though, for us tonight. So if you do want to support the show, one way you can do it in a way that's completely free to you is by leaving an Apple Podcast review. We actually have a new review, and we will read it on the show. And this is from Apple Podcasts in the UK. So, yes, even if you aren't in the US, we now have a way that we can see your Apple Podcast reviews easily to us. So if you've left a review and we have not read it in the past, let me know. I'll find it and dig it up and we'll read it. But this one is from Will JL, says, great podcast, 5 stars. Says, great podcast. Jake, Felix, and CJ do an awesome job for a guy in the UK. It's hard for me to watch more than just highlights. The guys here do a fantastic job to really flesh out what's happening, provide useful context. Great podcast and really fun. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Wow.
Yes,
those are some kind words.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, like Jake said, totally free way to support the show. It only takes a couple of minutes, but it's really appreciated, and it actually really helps in terms of podcast rankings, things like that. So definitely head over to Apple Podcasts, and takes just a couple minutes of your time. Now, if you want to support us even further, well, like we've already talked about numerous times now, we do have a Patreon. So for $1 a month, just a monthly pledge of $1, you get access to our Discord chat, patrons only. So during the game, we'll go back and forth, just bantering about what's going on in the game itself, talking about random topics.
Zen as may say drink.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I mean, for $1 a month, just a little pat on the back and a little more insight, I definitely think it's worth it. And then for $5 a month, you still get access to that, but you also get access to 2 bonus episodes a month. And as we've talked about, those are way more in depth. I mean, we did an entire hour on just the Ducks decade as a whole, looking at each season, talking about how the team got to where it is now. It's pretty in-depth stuff,
and it's very free flowing. A lot of the times, it's very much you and me just having a conversation, which
it really is.
Which we do have that here also, but there is a structure to it. There sometimes we don't always have a structure.
Also, just kind of not to totally sell out our pod here, but also, the post-game shows, we're obviously doing them usually late at night on weeknights, and so we're kind of more in a time crunch. With those, it's usually, weekend mornings. We're relaxed, just had a cup of coffee. So, yeah, those have a different vibe.
Except for the ones that we've tried to fit in after these, where we're up till 1 a.m.
Well, those just get crazy because
those get very loopy.
We just kind of lose it. Yeah. So those are good. Anyway, patreon.com/acpod. We're also on YouTube. I don't think I've heard Jake talk about that yet.
Yeah. Yes, I have.
You have?
Yes.
Okay. Well, there we go.
There you go again, people.
Yeah. So go to YouTube. Check us out there. We're also on Spotify, Stitcher, everywhere you can get your podcasts. Make sure to check out AnaheimCalling.com. That's at Anaheim Calling on Twitter. Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91. Follow him. I am on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. And that will be a wrap for tonight's podcast. We will be back on Sunday, I believe.
No podcast on Sunday.
No podcast on Sunday. Well, there you go.
We have a beer league game, Felix.
We do. That is it. Anyway.
The final one of the season.
We'll do something within the next few days, but we will be back.
We'll be back, I believe, Monday is what the plan is.
The Ducks play on Sunday against the Predators and then Tuesday against the Blue Jackets. So, hey, couple games to maybe get right. I don't know. The Predators have been up and down, and the Blue Jackets are solid, but they're not necessarily flush with talent. So that will do it for us tonight, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you at the next show. Talk to you then.
Bye.